For the new Louisiana vs. All Y'all channel on YouTube, Jared Roser here with Chessa Bouche from BR Proud, NBC Local 33, and WGMB Fox 44 here in Baton Rouge. And Chess, I talked to you some over the weekend about want to get some other sports reporters involved and just kind of have some fun with it, let people know a little bit more about y'all's background and stuff. And with you and a few others, I'd really like to talk some Last Dance while we're still kind of fresh on that. So we'll get to some of that. But appreciate you being the first other reporter to join me on one of these calls. And welcome. Hope all is going well.
Thank you. You too. But I do need a T-shirt that says Louisiana versus All Y'all so I can represent.
Yeah.
After I get that, we good to go.
Yeah, that's no problem. I was thinking about that when I was pulling this one out, that I need to make that kind of part of the routine of any of y'all or any of the young athletes or whoever's joining me. They need to get a T-shirt and kind of.
Yep. Because I will wear that everywhere because, I'm very loud and proud about being from Louisiana, and I love it. So I got to represent.
Beautiful. And I guess kind of what we were talking about a little bit before we got started, what's been up for you of late? It's been such weird times for everybody, just kind of dealing with the unprecedented situations that come along with the COVID-19 coronavirus. And for athletes, there's a lot of uncertainty of how to handle just workouts and when they'll be back on fields and courts and whatnot. And for sports reporters, that means a lot of uncertainty of what the heck are we covering on a day-to-day basis. So how have things been going for you guys over there?
It's been absolutely insane because, as you know, nobody expected anything like this to happen. It's never happened. And so for me to realize that, like, my last LSU baseball game that I covered was back in the beginning of March. And I remember, like, when the news broke that the Ivy League schools were talking about canceling the season, in my mind, I was like, there's no way that they're going to cancel this season. Like, that's just – maybe they're being dramatic, and then they canceled it, and it was just kind of stunning. And so for me, being the weekend sports anchor, it's so challenging because obviously there are no live sports, and normally the weekends are full of sports. And so we go from being crazy because it's that crossover time with basketball, going to the tournament or going into the SEC tournament, baseball, just about to start SEC play, as well as softball. So it was one of those things of just like, what do we do now? And it's been, like I said, just kind of crazy and mixed emotions because I realized that I don't have a life. All I do are sports, work out, and talk sports. So it's like, what do I do now? And so I've actually gotten to talk to a lot of people who have just kind of made this whole situation a little bit easier in the sense of I got to interview Ben McDonald. We talked baseball. We talked MLB. We talked everything. So to get his perspective and what he's going through, because he's impacted just like I am. I mean, even more so because he's on that national scale. And so it's one of those things of trying to deal with what do we do next? What is this fall going to look like? It's just been nuts, and I'm over it. I know the safety is important of the players, the coaches, everybody, but it's just, I don't think people realize how much like sports gave to us. And I feel like I'm extremely grateful, and I just want sports back to talk sports and to do sports and love all the things sports gives us. And so I've tried to be positive and talk to different people and kind of maybe take things in differently. When I go to interview somebody, ask them, what are you doing to stay positive, stay motivated? Because right now it's easy not to be motivated and just to sit and watch Netflix all day. And so to see kind of how people balance that out and still stay motivated is interesting to see, but it just, I can't believe we've gone this long without sports. Granted, golf came back this weekend and so did NASCAR, but it's still one of those things of, I can't believe it's what month are we in? May?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Like, I don't know my days. I don't know. It's just so weird. I just never saw anything like this happening.
Yeah, we're over 2 months in at this point because I think it was March 9th or 10th-ish or whatever that the NBA everything started to fall apart. I think Tuesday night that week, and then by that next Monday, the 16th, Governor Edwards was starting to scale back on what we could branch out and do in Louisiana. For folks that haven't seen some of those, I mean, any conversation with Ben McDonald is always really entertaining and interesting.
Yep.
I mean, beyond just baseball, but just kind of his perspective on a lot of things, particularly LSU, but just whatever you can get him to talk about at a given time.
Yep.
And I know everyone's been worried about what this means for the start of football season, and everything that happened at the beginning of this seems so long ago now. But this is a time of year that there's a lot of us that really grew up more as basketball fans maybe than, or at least as much as anything else. And so losing March Madness was tough, and now we're still waiting to see what happens with the NBA. And I know baseball is obviously as big in Baton Rouge as anywhere else on the college scene. So it's certainly been a weird deal, no doubt.
It's crazy. Right as the SEC tournament, they called it, and then they called March Madness, I interviewed assistant coach Taz Mitchell. And to get his perspective, he was super positive. He said that obviously it's sad for Skylar Mays and the seniors to not be able to compete at the highest level to get to that pinnacle like they've been pushing for their entire time in the purple and gold. But it's one of those things of, he was just positive about, we're going to make the most of this. We're going to use this to our advantage. We're going to still recruit, even though recruiting looks different, and just move forward. And I was kind of stunned. Obviously, he's sad that March Madness didn't happen, but he was just so positive and so motivated to just make it a plus, like a positive for them, which was cool to see. Because if I was a senior and didn't get to compete in my last NCAA tournament, that would be devastating. And I don't know how I would even be able to take that, just because that's the ultimate goal. When you go to college, you go to play ball. March Madness, that's the NCAA tournament, is what you're striving for day in and day out. So for me, it kills my heart knowing that these guys didn't get to compete their senior season. But like Coach Mitchell said, they're just going to make the most of it and try to make a push next season.
Yeah, it was really interesting talking to a lot of athletes that week. I remember the Thursday, the 12th, as things were starting to unfold, and even more so than now, no one knew anything about what to expect. And so I stopped at the Starbucks right there across from Tiger Stadium and was working on some stuff and kept running into athletes, and had girls from beach volleyball asking if I had any read on what this meant moving forward, because they were just trying to figure out what the heck is going on. So, top to bottom across the athletic department, it's been such a weird deal. And particularly for some of those seniors like a Skylar, who fortunately, I think I'm going to have a chance to talk to him today or tomorrow. A lot of his pre-draft process stuff sounds like it's going really well, and he's going to have a chance to still play some ball at further levels. But for some folks, this really was kind of it, and it's going to be weird. And mention just some of your background. You've been there. You've played your last basketball game at points and stuff like that. I guess tell folks, growing up in Shreveport, Bouche area, and then ending up, as much as you love Louisiana, you ended up at a little bit of a rival for LSU for a minute there, and just kind of, how did you end up where you are now? What's been kind of that path for you?
My path has been all over the place. So from Bossier City, I graduated. Ironically, went to Evangel Christian Academy for 3 years, and I was the first 7th grader in the state of Louisiana to play varsity ball, and did really well. Had a few playoff runs, and then ended up moving back to Bossier and graduated from Airline. Well, my junior season, I went to, sorry, my dogs like to be in a little camera time. Show short socks. Say
Hey.
Anyways, so my junior season, I was getting recruited, but not heavily, because being 5'2" and real grounded, you kind of are limited. And so I ended up having calm down. I ended up having they're crazy. They get it from me. So I ended up having a really good camp at Texas Tech. I verbally committed to Texas Tech, and that's where I thought I was going to go and play for Marcia Sharp. And then my senior season, a girl was 6'2" and played my position and had a breakout freshman year at Texas Tech. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to grow a foot ever, much less in like 7 months. So I decommitted to Texas Tech and was trying to figure out where I'm going to go, what's going to happen. Ended up at Ole Miss. I was a walk-on originally, and then ended up playing, and I never really played very much because, again, my athletic ability was not on that, like, you know, that tier, that SEC tier. But so after my freshman year, I was actually looking to transfer. I got looks from Memphis, and I actually was going to transfer into LSU. And that was when Pokey Chapman and Christy Sides were here in Baton Rouge. And I was pumped because I knew Christy Sides because I always wanted to play basketball at Louisiana Tech, even though, like, don't tell LSU people that. But I grew up on Louisiana Tech basketball, the Lady Techsters, who were such a powerhouse when I was growing up. And so Christy called me and asked me if I was looking to transfer, and I said, yeah. And so I was actually loading up my car to drive to Baton Rouge on a Friday, and this girl that I'd played against my entire life from South Louisiana, from Anacoco, actually ended up transferring from Vanderbilt to LSU and took that spot. And I was just like, all right, well, maybe something else will happen. So long story short, after playing college ball, I ended up playing semi-pro basketball in Shreveport. Did really well. It was a lot of fun, kind of crazy because there was so much talent, and we played Shreveport, New Orleans, Jackson, Memphis, and us. And we ended up going to the championship for the regionals and ended up getting blown out by Memphis. And this girl was like, looked like Ludacris, and she was on the And1 mixtapes, and she just like demolished us. Like, we didn't have an answer for it. So played that, ended up, I got my degree from Ole Miss. I always wanted to go to LSU, but I knew that I was never good enough to play at LSU. And so whenever I figured out, like, I want to be in sports broadcast, I knew that forever, but I wanted to live out my, like, playing days. And then once I, like, got serious, I went to grad school at LSU, only applied to LSU, got in, made the most of it, and kind of, I've been all over the place and finally got back to Baton Rouge. And for me, being North Louisiana girl, I love home, but nothing is like South Louisiana. And so that's kind of, when I got the call to get the job here in Baton Rouge, I was like, I'll start yesterday. Like, let's go. And so that's how I've been here. I love it. I wouldn't really want to be anywhere else. I mean, because you get spoiled with all the athletics. I mean, they compete on every level. And then on top of that, the people and the food. I mean, what more could you want?
You were worried about the shout out to the Lady Techsters upsetting the LSU people, and then you reference South Louisiana being the place to be, so now you have to worry about the folks back home.
Yeah, they're not going to like that. And especially like Jacob Hester, because I went to high school with him, he gets feisty with me because he's like, we got to represent the 318. And I was like, that's East Texas. That's not, and I can say that because I worked all over Texas. Like, it's not the same. It's, you can tell by their gumbo. You can tell. We didn't even have like really good crawfish places until like the past probably 5 years, which, being from Louisiana, we're supposed to have crawfish all the time. So, yeah.
It's always it's always interesting to travel around the state, particularly, I guess, growing up in South Louisiana. I think a lot of frustration from other areas of the state comes from South Louisiana just kind of having this tunnel vision and not thinking about the rest of the state. Yep. And it's a lot of times it's 100% accurate. When I started working out of LSU, went to Monroe, I had no concept of anything beyond basically New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Lafayette, and it's been one of my favorite parts of the years that I was doing prep sports and traveling all over the state. And when I started at TimesPicayuNola.com, we were really trying to do prep sports at a statewide level, and it was awesome to kind of open up and meet so many more people from so many places, cover some spots like Anacoco that not a lot of people know, but is such a deep basketball tradition there, and some great folks.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good athletics, but South Louisiana and North Louisiana are just two totally different entities. Yeah. Like, I get it that it's part of the boot, but it's just so different. I worked in college of grad school, and it just, I mean, Shreveport Bossier's a lot like College Station. It's got the same food, all of that. So, and also I think the people in South Louisiana are very welcoming and friendly, and just like they want to hug you and they want to buy you a drink and they want to feed you. And North Louisiana is just, it's not that way.
It reminds me of, I won't put all of his story out there, but it reminds me of a story that when Hobie Artigue and I were both in North Louisiana, just some frustration that came from him a couple times here and there. But I'll have to have him on at some point and see if he wants to talk about some of that.
Yes.
For you, growing up, obviously huge basketball player, fan, all of that. You were one of the people that I really wanted to get on this week in the wake of this Last Dance thing that's had us captivated the last 5 Sundays. What has it been like, particularly in this weird kind of COVID dead zone of sports situation, to sit back and watch some of that from our childhood that, I mean, really was kind of the basketball world that we grew up in, and see it all hashed back out?
It's been absolutely captivating from start to finish. One, just because of the time that we're in, we don't have anything to look forward to. And so every Sunday, I literally based everything around my day to be home to watch this. But even more so, I guess growing up and watching it, you knew like how incredible Michael Jordan and the Bulls were. But I think when you take a step back and you see what they did for the culture of the game itself, I mean, bringing in the triangle offense and doing all the things that Phil Jackson did, just kind of, makes you realize like they were revolutionary in a time that it was kind of stagnant. But for me, I am a huge NBA fan from the 90s to the early 2000s. Lately, I'm still a fan, but it's one of those like the game was just different. You were playing tooth and nail. You were going to lose a tooth. You were like the fouls, the defense, I get excited about steals, fast breaks, good passes, and to see the ball movement, to see kind of the evolution of having, like Michael Jordan said, they were a shitty team to start with. And then they basically grew it into a dynasty that completely dominated on every level. Just to see the evolution of it, this documentary was incredible. The behind-the-scenes footage, like that crew got so – I am so jealous that I wasn't a part of that crew. I mean, obviously, I think I'd been 12 back then, so obviously I probably wouldn't do a whole lot. But what I would give to be on that crew and to see and to go through that and just to experience it is absolutely insane and mind-blowing. And for me, I get excited not only to like relive my childhood and to see all that, and obviously I think Michael Jordan is the GOAT of all GOATs, but for generations of people who didn't see that, didn't experience that. I mean, people know Michael Jordan, but to see what he brought to the game day in and day out, and to see just, I guess for me, the word would just be magical. It was just magic on so many levels to see that, and for them to experience it now in 2020 is just so neat. They are extremely blessed to be able to see that because, again, I mean, a girl I work with, Brooke Kirchhoffer, she's 25. She never watched Michael play. Like she was born late 90s. So she had no idea, and she's blown away. And to see her kind of relive what I got to grow up on is a really neat experience.
Yeah, that's been kind of one of my biggest pieces of enjoyment through this. Is obviously it's been awesome to kind of relive some of that, but it's also been cool to have people watching it that I guess are in our age range but weren't sports fans at that same early age as we were, or may still not be, but have just kind of gotten hooked in on this story and this huge moment that the country really in a lot of ways is looking back on. And then also some of the younger big sports fans that just they weren't there yet, and kind of their first recollection of who the greatest were Kobe or even LeBron, and just had never seen Jordan and company until now. And also I knew I was going in, be really intrigued by the kind of the sports and sports media type dynamics, because anytime I see anything from the 80s, 90s, whatever, it's always so interesting to look at how different some of those relationships and interactions are. And there's been a lot of talk about how different Dennis Rodman might be viewed in a Twitter world.
Oh.
But just, I mean, across the entire spectrum of these 10 episodes, you see so many different exchanges and just like a level of access there that isn't always the same because of the way things have developed, and in some ways has had to. And it kind of makes you long for wishing you could have been active in this world at that time.
Yeah.
If we had been born 10, 20 years earlier,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't have had to be 12 at the time the documentary was being filmed and could actually have maybe been involved in some of that. But,
yeah, the whole production was insane. I think that it hit a lot of points that people might not have realized what was going on, because obviously being 12, I didn't know about Jerry Krause and what he was doing and him essentially breaking the team down. I mean, he brought in the talent, but then he was quick to be like, oh, well, let's disperse and do something different, which to me is just asinine when you have this dynasty. Ride that coattail till it's done. And whenever the last episode, whenever they said, like they just weren't worth what we were going to have to pay them.
Yeah.
So you're saying a world championship for the 7th time isn't worth it? Like, come on, dude. There are a lot of things, and to see what they went through despite everything and how they dominated just is mind-blowing. And I know that a lot of people have talked about how Michael Jordan, obviously he was a natural-born leader and he was hard on people, but I don't think people realize in order to be a leader, you have to sacrifice so much. And of course he's going to chew somebody's ass out. Of course he's going to ride you. Like, he brought the best out in everybody. I mean, Scottie Pippen wouldn't have been the player he became without Jordan. And that's insane to realize that somebody, not only did he change the game, but he changed the players. I mean, it was telling when Phil Jackson didn't call that timeout, in game 6? Like, he knew they knew what they needed to do. I mean, that's a coach, that's a player. And for me, I love the players, but I'm such a coach. Coaches are what drive me. They excite me. That's why I love Will Wade. I love his mind. I love how he works. So for me, I've always been a coach's fan. So I'm a fan of Phil Jackson through and through. This is so funny, but I think I was in 4th grade and I did a book report on Phil Jackson and had to dress up like him, and so stuff like that. I'm just coaches and how they handle their team, because I mean, who else is going to handle Dennis Rodman?
Yeah.
I mean, he's a tough one. So there's different dynamics, and to see just kind of what all they went through and to be so successful and to see it firsthand is just incredible. And I will say, I will always regret selling my Bulls starter jacket. Like, if I had that today, I would be wearing it right now. I'd be putting on the AC and I would be rocking my starter jacket, because I got made fun of because me and my friend Lindsay were the only girls that had starter jackets, and I rocked the Bulls starter jacket all day, every day. So, yeah.
So with that appreciation for what was happening at that point and Phil Jackson and everything, did you grow up predominantly a Bulls fan, or was it more you were a fan of another team but just had kind of respect for what was happening in Chicago?
Well, for me, I didn't get into the NBA until the early 90s, because I was born in 85, so the early 90s, I'd be 7. And at that time, obviously, information wasn't at your fingertips, so you didn't know, I couldn't Google, hey, the Bulls, blah, 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 because, I mean, heck, I don't even think we had dial-up yet. I think dial-up came in, 8 or 95 or something like that. So for me, it was just watching the game and loving the game, and I was such a fan of the game of women's basketball, because my mom exposed me to Louisiana Tech, because it was at Ruston, an hour from home, and so we'd go. And so I just grew up loving basketball. And then once I started watching NBA, it was just a love of the game and a love of just the fierceness and the competitiveness, because I mean, back then they were breaking arms and breaking ankles, and I mean, you weren't going up for a layup or a dunk without somebody just trying to take it away from you. And so for me, I just grew up on all of that and I loved it. And so going in, watching, I remember Michael coming in when it was early in his career, but just kind of being mesmerized with what he was able to do and how he was able to shoot and the stuff that he brought to the game that I had never been exposed to. And so seeing him and doing all of that, I became a fan of Michael. But then once Phil came into the picture, I just was in awe of Phil and what he was able to do. And so that's kind of how my love for the NBA started, was Michael and then Phil. And then from then on, it's always been coaches.
Yeah. It's interesting to my entire life have looked back to those years and that level of intensity and physicality and kind of missed those basketball days. And it's so weird to look back and remember that as this great time, but in retrospect be watching Michael Jordan punching Reggie Miller in the face on national TV last night and be like, no, this is what was better, is these dudes going at the Heat and the Knicks, or the Pacers Knicks, or Bulls Knicks, and really anyone first the Knicks and Pacers for a while there. And people absolutely being willing to get into a fight, but there was just something about that level of intensity that I think folks 5-10 years younger than us will never really completely understand.
Yeah. And that's, to me, like, because people get feisty with me, because in all honesty, when, the NBA was up and running, I'll watch highlights here and there, but like, I don't want to sit down and watch a game because I get so frustrated with the one-on-ones, with the, just for me, the way that I played 110. I broke my nose, I broke my cheekbone, I broke everything, because for me, I just gave it everything that I had, because that's how basketball was played back then. Like, you're going to go balls to the wall and leave nothing back. Like, that's what I grew up on. That's what I saw. So that's how I played. And not saying that the NBA doesn't play hard now. It's just not the same level. So for me, it's hard to watch because I get frustrated. I'm like, he didn't even rebound. He didn't even box anybody out. Like, Dennis Rodman would have demolished every one of y'all because he's going after that loose ball. He's doing all that. So to me, I can't get excited about that. I think that's maybe why I'm such a big fan of Will Wade's squads, because they play so hard and they leave everything out there. And I respect that. But it's hard to be as respectful with how the game is played now. Like, it just drives me insane. Because I'm just like, where is that just passion, that drive that, we saw from Michael Jordan day in and day out? Whenever his trainer, like, teared up saying, those 3 hours you watch me, I'm going to give it my all. That's what I think the world didn't realize, that was his motivation. That he wanted to be the best. He wanted to show you the best that he had, and to see what he put in day out and what he did for his, pushing his team, because he wanted them to reach the pinnacle and to be the best. And so just to see all of that, every time I watch one episode or the start, I want to go find a basketball goal and go play so bad, because it's just so motivating. If that's not motivating, like, you don't have a heart. Point blank period. There's no way you don't have a heart if you see that and don't get excited.
Yeah, I think those were some of the crucial moments of kind of understanding Jordan, were obviously the end of that. I think it was episode 7 that everyone kept rerunning, of him talking about the sacrifices that came with wanting to win at that level. And then as it all kind of wrapped up Sunday night, there was this takeaway of athletically and just a talent level is not where he was set apart from, particularly from some of the folks that have followed, but there was a singularity of his focus and competitiveness that you saw throughout these 10 episodes that really kind of set him apart.
Yeah, his focus and his drive were just on another level. And it was really so, and this might be a little off topic, but growing up, being a Bulls fan, loving Michael Jordan day in and day out, whenever the transition into Kobe, when it started, it was hard for me at first to be like, I'm a Kobe fan. And I told you, I'm a Phil Jackson fan through and through. Love Shaq for obvious reasons. But it was one of those things of like, I am so loyal that I was like, should I really like be a Kobe fan? Like, isn't that going against everything with Michael Jordan? But to see him basically say, you wouldn't have those 5 championships had it not been Michael. Like, that was one of the most telling, incredible, just like snippets in the documentary series just because he's paying homage. Like, he knew that he wouldn't have done what he did had it not been for Michael Jordan. And I think that speaks volumes, because not only did Michael Jordan change the evolution of the game, but for him to have an impact and do that even more so throughout when he wasn't, he retired. And for him to be able to do that even later is just telling of his impact and what he did for the game of basketball.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Chessa, I certainly appreciate it. I've got one of these young football guys who's itching.
Uh-oh.
We were supposed to hop on about 10 or 15 minutes ago, but this has been such a fun conversation. So we're going to definitely have to do it again, and I'm going to have to, in the meantime, get you one of these shirts too.
Yes, medium.
Got you. There you go. Chessa, thanks so much.
Bye.